So we're delighted to have you here, Amanur, and the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thanks so much for Chetan for your nice intro. Hello everyone. My name is Münir Herdem and I am delighted to be here today. In this talk, I'll take you through the world of green hydrogen, exploring the hype, the realities, and the policy and governance challenges surrounding it. I'll also highlight where green hydrogen can realistically play a role in clean energy transition and where its potential may be overstated. This presentation moves from fundamentals of hydrogen all the way to the policy and governance challenges specific to green hydrogen. First, I start with a bit of background on hydrogen itself, then walk through key national hydrogen strategies, highlight some of the major challenges in green hydrogen development, and explore a promising early application green ammonia. Finally, I'll discuss the need for a governance framework for green hydrogen ecosystem and share key takeaways and policy implications. Throughout the talk, I'll also share insights from my own research activities and findings to support the discussion. Hydrogen is one of the most talked about topics in the energy world right now. A new paper on hydrogen is published every 20 minutes. And it's not just academic. There is an overwhelming number of technical reports, policy briefs, and media coverage, especially across Europe. But I didn't choose this topic just because it's popular. To be honestly, I really love trend topics because it is easy to find funding for publication to get citation. But what drew me in is something deeper. The way green hydrogen brings together technology, physical sciences, policy, and governance all in one. Let me explain what I mean by that. We need physical sciences for green hydrogen ecosystems and technologies to understand the fundamental limits and future possibilities of new technologies. We need technology and engineering to improve processes and make systems more efficient. And we need policy to create the rules, standards, and incentives that guide deployment. And we need governance to coordinate these parts and manage the ecosystem as a whole. Thus, to me, green hydrogen is a perfect lens to study the challenges and opportunities of the clean energy transition, energy security, and affordability. In that sense, it's more than a topic. It is a window into a broader and often overlooked interdisciplinary perspective. Let's take a quick look at how hydrogen is produced and used today. Globally, we produce about 100 million tons of hydrogen per year. As shown on the slide, the vast majority of this hydrogen is made using fossil fuels, especially natural gas, which accounts for around 62% of production. Coal also contributes a significant share. Specifically, it is used in China to produce hydrogen, while only 1% come from clean sources. On the slide, we can also see how this hydrogen is being used. The bulk of it goes into just three sectors: refining, ammonia production, and methanol production. These applications account for most of the global hydrogen demand today. The dominant method for hydrogen production today is steam methane reforming process. Put simply, this process uses natural gas and steam to produce hydrogen. However, the climate impact of this process is significant. It emits around 10.91 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilogram of hydrogen produced. So while hydrogen is often associated with clean energy, right now it is still largely a fossil-based system. This is one of the main reasons why we need to rethink how hydrogen is produced. And that brings us to the concept of green hydrogen. Today, one of the main goals in hydrogen field is to make hydrogen clean by using renewable energy sources instead of fossil fuels. When hydrogen is produced using renewables, we refer to it as green hydrogen. In various reports, you might also come across terms like low carbon hydrogen or clean hydrogen. From a policy perspective, though, using color codes alone can be misleading because even green hydrogen can vary in its actual climate impact, depending on the source and system efficiency. I want to just add a quick note here. Different countries and regions use different life cycle emissions thresholds to define whether hydrogen qualifies as low carbon. For example, the threshold is 2.4 kilograms carbon dioxide equivalent per kilogram of hydrogen in the United Kingdom, 4 kilograms in the United States, and 3 kilograms in the European Union. In this talk, I'll use the term green hydrogen to refer broadly to clean hydrogen produced using renewable energy. As illustrated in this slide, green hydrogen is typically produced using renewable energy sources such as wind, solar, hydropower, or biomass-based electricity. The key technology here is the electrolyzer, which splits water into oxygen and hydrogen using electricity. So green hydrogen is essentially a process of turning renewable electricity into hydrogen fuel. After production, hydrogen needs to be either transported via pipelines, trucks, or ships, or stored for later use. On the slide, you can see the potential end-use sectors, including power generation, transportation, industrial applications like iron and steel, and even heating. While current hydrogen use is still dominated by sectors like refining, ammonia, and methanol productions, countries are planning to expand green hydrogen use into these new application areas. In recent years, green hydrogen has gained a lot of attention, but in the past, the drivers behind hydrogen policy were quite different. This slide shows historical United States energy prices adjusted for inflation. While it is United States data, the global pattern is similar. Energy prices shift with crisis, revealing system vulnerabilities. Serious interest in hydrogen began in 1970s during the oil shocks, mainly for transport applications. But each time oil prices dropped, interest faded. This cycle lasted until the Paris Agreement in 2017, which renewed focus on hard to decarbonize sectors. More recently, the Russia-Ukrainian war pushed energy security to the forefront, especially in Europe. So while the drivers have changed, one thing is clear. Hydrogen policy has always reflected broader energy, climate, and economic shifts. After the Paris Agreement in 2017, global interest in hydrogen surged, especially as countries aimed for net zero goals. Many governments published their national hydrogen strategies and roadmaps to guide deployment. Firstly, Japan published their national hydrogen strategies, followed by the European Union countries, Australia, Canada, US, and others. In total, there are now 46 national hydrogen strategies, 8 roadmaps, and over 20 more in progress, most focused on green hydrogen. These plans usually follow a 3-phase rollout, starting with pilot projects, moving to early market entry, and scaling up by 2030. To support these, countries use different policies to reduce risk and build demand, but challenges remain. 42 countries want to export hydrogen, while only 12 plan to import, raising the risk of oversupply. Many strategies also lack alignment on long-term targets, creating uncertainty about future supply and demand. Meanwhile, many countries plan to use ammonia as the main method to ship hydrogen due to its easier storage and transport. After 2018, global interest in hydrogen increased and many large-scale projects were announced. However, things haven't gone as planned. A significant number of these projects have since been delayed or quickly cancelled. The hype around hydrogen is now being tested by real-world challenges. A recent study published in Nature Energy took a close look at the current state of green hydrogen projects. Out of 190 target projects, only 7% completed on schedule by 2023. This clearly shows a major gap between ambition and real-world implementation. The paper also highlights a major financing challenge. Without effective carbon pricing, completing the full pipeline of planet green hydrogen projects would require global subsidies of over 1.3 trillion US dollars, far beyond what governments have currently committed. Despite the growing interest and support for green hydrogens, many projects are being delayed or even cancelled. Why? Because hydrogen faces significant challenges across its entire value chain. First, production is still expensive. Transportation is also costly unless it is done by pipeline, which sounds promising. But today, we don't yet have dedicated hydrogen pipeline infrastructure in place. When it comes to storage, small-scale options are expensive, while large-scale storage solutions remain largely unproven. Distribution is another cost-heavy component. And finally, on the demand side, most current users are highly price-sensitive and emerging applications are still too expensive to be widely adopted. I also want to highlight the energy challenge related to green hydrogen production. This slide helps illustrate the sheer scale of the energy challenge facing green hydrogen production. Today, if we want to replace just that existing demand with green hydrogen, we would need an amount of electricity equal to 1.25 times the entire global wind and solar power generation of 2023. That gives you a sense of the scale. Even greening today's hydrogen without expanding demand would already require a massive global build out of renewable energy infrastructure. Until now, I have mainly focused on economic problems of green hydrogen and briefly mentioned about its energy challenge. However, we can actually classify the challenges into technological, economic, institutional, and social categories. And all of these challenges interact with each other, which creates the green hydrogen deadlock. To overcome these barriers, coordination is key. This illustration shows just how complex the relationships are among stakeholders, policymakers, investors, producers, and off-takers. Everyone depends on everyone else for information and action. For example, off-takers need clear information from producers about the price, quantity, and physical properties of green hydrogen to assess its feasibility for their operations. At the same time, producers hesitate to invest in large-scale electrolyzers without firm offtake agreements that guarantee demand. Policymakers play a crucial role in breaking this deadlock by providing clear regulations, support policies, and standards to create a stable environment for both producers and off-takers. However, policymakers often need input from stakeholders to design effective measures, which can be challenging if those stakeholders lack experience or data. Investors, on the other hand, require detailed project information and policy clarity to evaluate risk and allocate funding. Without coordination, this cycle of dependency creates delays and uncertainty, slowing progress in the hydrogen sector. Collaboration and transparent communication among all parties are essential to move forward and unlock the potential of green hydrogen. Without sharing understanding and collaboration, the system stalls. That is why breaking the deadlock requires not just technologies or subsidies, but better governance and cooperation. Now that we have briefly seen all the barriers facing green hydrogen, I want to highlight a critical technology policy challenge. Here is the dilemma. We don't urgently need green hydrogen today. Right now, our main focus should be on electrifying as much as possible, cleaning up the electricity grid, deploying heat pumps, and expanding the use of electric vehicles. But in the long term, green hydrogen become essentials. We need it for sectors that can easily be electrified, like steel production, fertilizer manufacturing, and heavy-duty transport. So here is the challenge. If we wait until we actually need green hydrogen, it will be too late to build the industry from scratch. That is why we need to start preparing today. So the green hydrogen infrastructure, supply chains, and expertise are in place when the demand arrives. All of the challenges I have discussed along with this technology policy dilemma lead me to some key research questions. I have three key research questions guiding the papers I have been working on. The first question is about the key parameters affecting the levelized cost of green hydrogen and how we can create a conceptual standardization framework for eco-techno-economic analysis of green hydrogen production systems. The second question focuses on early applications of green hydrogen, specifically which of these applications, such as green ammonia, can be the most promising as strategic entry points for commercialization, and what kinds of institutional gaps and governance frameworks are needed to support their successful deployment. And finally, my third research question is about governance. What kind of alternative governance model can be developed to help overcome the green hydrogen deadlock and support a more effective and equitable hydrogen ecosystem? To answer my research questions, I developed a two-part methodology. The first part was a systematic literature review covering both academic and grey literature sources. Starting from about 100,000 papers, I filtered it down to around 140 of the most relevant academic articles, plus 20 grey literature documents. From this, I extracted both qualitative and quantitative data. In my recent study, the extraction produced 5,000 data points. I use a structured protocol to capture key aspects like system design, technologies, performance, environmental and economic indicators, and regional context. For the techno-economic analysis, I focused specifically on hydrogen production, not the entire value chain, because of the time limitation. I also applied a standardization method, converting all of the currencies to United States dollars, adjusting for inflation, and estimating avoided carbon dioxide cost to identify trends. Earlier studies also informed my proposal for an alternative governance model for green hydrogen. On the slide, we see the levelized cost of green hydrogen production using different electrolyzer technologies. The data comes from my recent study. We haven't submitted it, but hopefully it will be published soon. I won't go into technical details here. Instead, I want to highlight the levelized cost of hydrogen. That is the average cost of producing hydrogen over a project's lifetime, including all capital, operating, and energy costs. Different countries have set ambitious cost targets for 2030. For example, the United States aims for $1 per kilogram of hydrogen produced. Chile targets 1.5, and Japan aims for $2.40. But as shown in the figure, current green hydrogen prices are still well above these targets. Even looking ahead, projections suggest that in many cases, costs will remain higher than these targets. Of course, in some regions, lower costs may be achievable due to favorable local conditions like abundant renewables or lower financing costs. But overall, green hydrogen remains significantly more expensive than traditional fossil-based hydrogen, which raises major concerns about its competitiveness and accessibility. Now, let's talk about the cost of carbon dioxide avoided, which is a usable way to frame the economic challenge of green hydrogen. Instead of just looking at hydrogen production cost, a smarter approach is to ask, how much would we need to tax carbon to make green hydrogen cost competitive? To answer this, I estimated the cost of carbon dioxide avoided, a common metric for assessing the economic effectiveness of emission reduction strategies. In my recent study, I extracted data from the literature for various green hydrogen production pathways using steam methane reforming as the reference case. As shown in the figure, the average cost of avoiding 1 ton of carbon dioxide is quite high. In many cases, over $400 per ton. This suggests that without strong carbon pricing or targeted policy support, green hydrogen remains economically uncompetitive in most situations today. Despite its challenges, green hydrogen remains essential, especially for decarbonizing hard-based sectors. There is no alternative for sectors. The International Energy Agency identifies hydrogen and its derivatives as one of the key pillars of any net zero pathway by 2050. But to move forward, we need to focus on realistic early applications. One of the strongest candidates is green ammonia for 3 reasons. It is technically mature, it has growing global interest, and it meets well-established demands in fertilizer production. Ammonia already contributes about 1% of global emissions and accounts for a significant share of chemical sector emissions and energy use. With over 150 million tons produced globally in 2023 and 10% traded internationally, the infrastructure and trade routes are already in place. That is what makes green ammonia a powerful early entry point. We don't need to invent any market. We can plug green hydrogen into an existing one. It is one of the most practical ways to scale green hydrogen and deliver real climate impact. Another important reason to focus on ammonia is that price fluctuations in fossil fuels, especially during times of crisis, can actually present an opportunity for green hydrogen and ammonia. Ammonia prices are highly sensitive to natural gas prices since conventional ammonia production relies heavily on natural gas. For example, in 2019, the price of ammonia was about $300 per ton. But during COVID and the energy crisis that followed, prices skyrocketed, reaching nearly $1,650 per ton. This dramatic spike illustrates the vulnerability of ammonia markets to fossil fuel shocks. By switching to green hydrogen-based ammonia production, we can decouple ammonia from fossil gas. That means not only more stable long-term pricing, but also greater energy security, especially for countries exposed to geopolitical supply risk. So while fossil fuel volatility is a challenge, it is also a strategic window for green hydrogen to enter the market competitively. That is why green ammonia is not just a climate solution, it is also an economic and geopolitical opportunity. Even though green ammonia holds tremendous promise, its commercialization is being slowed by institutional and governance gaps. This slide summarizes the key drivers, bottlenecks, and resulting outcomes I currently observe. Despite strong drivers like climate targets, national hydrogen strategies, and growing sectoral demand, progress is blocked by a number of structural challenges. These include the lack of standardized frameworks for techno-economic and life cycle assessment, fragmented regulatory responsibilities, weak international certification mechanisms, and enriched infrastructure locked into fossil-based ammonia systems. These bottlenecks lead to undesirable outcomes, uncoordinated pilot projects, investment hesitancy, global trade inefficiencies, and ultimately slow adoption despite the clear potential of green ammonia. To move forward, we urgently need coordinated governance reforms from setting standards to infrastructure planning, and above all, international cooperation to align incentives and remove these structural barriers. There are significant institutional gaps and governance challenges for commercializing green ammonia. However, in my early work at the Basel School, I focus on designing an alternative governance model specifically for green hydrogen ecosystem. To build this model, I began by studying past policy interventions in emerging technologies, particularly in clean energy, to understand how and why certain policies fail and what we can learn from them when developing governance frameworks for green hydrogen. One striking case was Spain's Royal Decree 6061/2007, which I analyzed in detail through a dedicated technology governance case study. I won't go into all the details today, but I want to just highlight a few critical insights. First, the policy failed to include adaptive cost control mechanisms. It didn't account for the rapid technological advancement in solar PV, leading to unsustainable subsidy burdens. Second, the policy changed retroactively. This damaged investor confidence. A lack of predictability undermines long-term planning. Third, there was insufficient monitoring and coordination across government institutions, making it difficult to respond to fast-moving market dynamics. And finally, stakeholder engagement was weak. Civil society and industry actors were not systematically consulted, which limited the policy responsiveness and legitimacy. These lessons are highly relevant for green hydrogen, a technology landscape of full uncertainties. That is why, drawing on these insights, I developed an early version of an alternative governance model tailored to green hydrogen ecosystem, which I'll share with you next. Building on the lessons from Spain's solar policy failure, this figure illustrates a governance model I developed specifically for the green hydrogen ecosystem. At its core, the model identifies four deeply interconnected barriers: technological, economic, institutional, and social. Instead of treating these barriers in isolation, as many current policies do, this model emphasizes integrated solutions. In the middle layer, we introduce targeted governance mechanisms. For example, research-informed education and active talent attraction not only address technological gaps, but also reduce social resistance. Strategic use of public funding and fostering cross-sector innovation help overcome both economic and institutional inertia. But the model's outer layer is where systemic transformation truly begins. Here, 6 key stakeholder groups: policymakers, investors, producers, off-takers, governments, and researchers are positioned to engage in continuous bidirectional exchanges of knowledge, resources, and influence. These interactions are essential to align incentives, sharing risk, and coordinating action at scale. The overarching message is this: to break the current impasse in green hydrogen development, we must shift away from fragmented efforts. Instead, we need an integrated ecosystem-based governance strategy that's inclusive, adaptive, and collaborative. Only then we can accelerate innovation, scale deployment, and ensure green hydrogen reaches its real potential. Let me share with a few key takeaways and policy implications that emerge from these analyses. First, uncertainty remains one of the biggest barriers to green hydrogen deployment. That means we need policy responses designed not just to promote the technology, but to reduce this uncertainty and create the conditions for coordinated action. A foundational step is enhanced data transparency. Without reliable data, especially on cost, performance, and deployment conditions, it is incredibly difficult for policymakers, investors, and developers to make sound decisions. We need robust system-wide frameworks for data sharing across the ecosystem. Second, we need integrated hydrogen governance. As I emphasized in the previous slide, technical, economic, and institutional challenges cannot be solved in isolation. We must build governance models that align stakeholders, coordinate decisions, and support cross-sector collaboration. Third, it is essential to target early commercial application with clear decarbonization benefits. Green ammonia is a great example. It has existing demand, a well-defined use case, and real emissions reduction potential. These kinds of applications should be prioritized over more speculative ones. And finally, we must avoid subsidizing unviable hydrogen users. Public funding is limited. It should go where it delivers measurable impact, not to projects that sound good on paper, but fail economically or environmentally. In short, if we want to unlock green hydrogen's full potential, we need smarter governance, more clear priorities, and policies grounded in evidence, not hype. As we wrap up, I would like to briefly highlight a few remaining questions that I haven't focused on in today's talk. These are areas I plan to explore further in coming year. First, how might alternative technologies such as battery storage systems evolve and compete with green hydrogen in the decades ahead? Second, what scale of electricity generation will be required to support the growing demand from emerging applications like data centers, electric vehicles, heat pumps, and broader electrification efforts? And third, how much renewable electricity, especially from wind and solar, can we realistically expect to deploy to meet these future energy needs? Answering these questions will require systematic research, interdisciplinary collaboration, and robust data. Only then we can make smarter decisions and move toward a future that's not only clean and secure, but also affordable for all. Thanks so much for your interest and attention.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of the hour. So thank you again, Munir. Excellent comprehensive talk. Very, very informative and helpful for our understanding.